The entrance procession appears in liturgical texts around the 300s. This was when Christianity was finally legalized by Emperor Constantine. His mother, Empress Helena, was a Christian and great advocate for the faith. She even used imperial funds to order the construction of some large basilicas. The word basilica is Greek and means the house of the king. At the time, a basilica was a governmental office building, similar to a city hall today. It was a large hall with two rounded ends, and it contained all that was necessary to hear court cases, levy taxes, and administer local governance. As Jesus was the new king, and a basilica was one of the largest indoor spaces in the ancient world, Helena started commissioning them as churches, especially in important holy sites, including the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem, over the cave where Jesus was born, and the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, the location of the tomb of Jesus. Before Christianity was legalized, we had been meeting for Mass in the larger homes of wealthier Christians, keeping in mind that a large home in the ancient Roman Empire would still struggle to match the square footage of a home in the Bayou Club. So for the first 300 years, the Mass looked even more like a dinner party than today. Moving to the much bigger and more formal basilicas meant that the liturgy became larger and more formal as well. The liturgy picked up the procession from the basilica. Just like there is a formal entrance for a judge when he or she enters their courtroom, there was also a formal processional entrance for government officials when they would ascend the dais and take the seat of judgment. This all fit with the symbolism of the vestments, since the priest is acting in the person of God, using his power. The way that a government official would, the priest started processing into the basilicas in a similar manner. The entrance procession also reminds us of a few other elements of our reality. First, we are the church militant, who continue to fight the war against evil on earth. We are united to the church suffering in purgatory and the church triumphant in heaven. Ancient armies used to march behind the standard, or military symbol, of their leader. They are the ancient equivalent of the way we treat flags today. Actually, a lot of standards were vertical banners that evolved into the horizontal banners of modern flags. Standards were used as a rallying point, a way to issue orders to the troops, and a sign of unity and pride amongst the military unit. To lose a standard was one of the greatest shames an imperial soldier could endure, to the point that whole battles were fought to recover standards that had been lost in previous battles. Early Christians realized that the way the Roman army treated their standards was similar to the way they saw the cross, which is our rallying point, a communication of God's love to us and a unifying sign amongst Christians. So our procession usually starts with an altar server carrying our standard, a crucifix. If incense is used, it goes in front of the crucifix as a sign of honor. Other than that, a crucifix always leads the procession. After the crucifix, the rest of the procession is layered primarily by rank, starting with the other altar servers. Some parishes will have the first two servers after the cross carry torches as an additional sign of respect for the crucifix. After the servers comes any additional members of the procession. This is where we fit in the Knights of Columbus, people receiving sacraments, the remains at a funeral, or any layperson who is processing in for some purpose, like when we have members of the community process up to light the Advent wreath. Next comes the deacon carrying the book of the Gospels. A layperson can carry this in the procession if a deacon isn't present. As the Gospels are the written accounts of the life and words of Jesus Christ, they are a special presentation of him on earth, and one of the unique ways of contact with him. This is why the person carrying the book of the Gospels does not stop at the steps of the altar to reverence the altar like everyone else does. Instead, deacon goes straight to the altar and enthrones the Gospels there before he bows to the altar. As a reminder of this importance, I personally make a point of not reverencing the altar until the deacon has finished enthroning the Gospels there. This way, I get to reverence three things with a genuflection: the altar itself, the Gospels on the altar, and the Eucharist inside the tabernacle. Following the book of the Gospels are any other deacons for the Mass. Concelebrating priests follow the deacons and then the celebrant. Most of you won't see more than a handful of deacons or priests celebrate Mass at one time, but if you end up at a Mass with a bishop, cardinal, or pope, then the procession continues with each rank in order, with the highest ranks coming last. The biggest Mass I have personally been in a procession for was at the opening vigil to the March for Life in Washington, D.C., where the massive Basilica of the Immaculate Conception was packed to standing room only and overflowing outside, and the procession contained 450 seminarians as servers, 100 deacons, 250 priests, 100 bishops, 25 cardinals, along with the Cardinal Archbishop of Washington as the celebrant, and the papal nuncio, the ambassador from the Vatican to the United States. The procession alone took 25 minutes, and there were tears in everyone's eyes to see the full glory of God's church on display. Usually, the most highly ranked member of the clergy at any Mass will be the celebrant of that Mass. But there are exceptions to that. Regardless, the main celebrant always comes last. If the celebrant is a bishop or higher, then he is usually flanked by two deacons, as deacons are basically meant to be the temporal assistants to the bishop. The two primary deacons, the deacon of the Word, who proclaims the gospel, and the deacon of the altar, who prepares the altar for the liturgy of the Eucharist, always stay near the bishop and sit to his right and left during Mass. A bishop will also be followed by two servers who are there to carry his mitre and crozier, the pointy hat and curved staff that are symbols of his office. One last thing to mention about the entrance procession is that it is a reminder of the pilgrim nature of the church. We are not at home. We cannot be stagnant. We must always move towards our goals of God and heaven. The procession of the ministers and clergy into the celebration reminds us of this movement.